Hello grade 8s, this is Mr. Miller and welcome to lesson 6.4 on multiplying improper fractions and mixed numbers. So first of all, let's take a look at number 1. It says the diagram below models 2.5 times 3 2/3. We want to use the diagram to complete the questions. So here we have our diagram, 3 2/3 times 2.5. It's basically a length times a width. This area is going to model the answer to this multiplication question. So we want to fill in the blanks to find the partial areas as they're divided up in the diagram there. We want to label the area of each of the regions in the diagram as you calculate it. So looking at the partial areas, the first one we have is 2 times 3 is equal to 6. So if we look at the partial area of 2 times 3, which is equal to 6, in the diagram we're talking about this one right here. 2 times 3, and this is equal to an area of 6. So let's just shade this in, and I'm going to label that it has an area of 6. Okay, great. So here the area is equal to 2 times 3, which is equal to 6 square units. That's the first partial area. Now the next one we'd like to look at is something times 2/3. So to look at this one here, the something times 2/3, and you can probably figure out that that something is 2 times 2/3. So here, if we find this area is equal to 2 times 2/3, and that's equal to 4/3. Alright, so back out here, we have 2 times 2/3 is 4/3. And now, the next partial area that we're going to be looking at is something times 1/2. So, pick a different color here to do some highlighting. So here we'd like to look at something times 1/2. So, and of course, just going back to the diagram here, something times 1/2. Well, that something would be 3. So 3 times 1/2 gives us another one of the partial areas. So this particular area here inside here is 3 times 1/2, which is equal to 3/2. Alright, so again, right over here, this is 3 times 1/2 is equal to 3/2. And last little partial area here we have is let's just pick one final color to work with here. How about pink? So this little rectangular spot there, this has an area of 2/3 times 1/2. And when we do 2/3 times 1/2, there is a factor of 2 that divides out here and there. So we end up with an area of 1 times 1 is 1, and 3 times 1 is 3. So, sorry that's a little bit small there. Let me just zoom in on that so that you can see it a little bit better. And I can, of course, maybe write this a little bit bigger too. So we did 2/3 times 1/2, and that gives you 1/3 for the final partial area. So just zoom back out here and answer the rest of this question. Lock that in as is. Alright, so the final multiplication that we did to find a partial area was 2/3 times 1/2, which gave us 1/3. So now what we're going to do to find the total area of this rectangle, okay, and again the rectangle overall is 3 2/3 tall by 2.5 wide. Okay, so when we do that multiplication, we'll get an answer which comes from these 4 partial areas. And so again, just going back to the first one, which we had labeled in blue, it was 6. And the second one, which we had labeled in yellow, we had an area here of 4/3. And then we had another area which we labeled in sort of an orangey color, and that was 3/2. And then we had another one in pink, and that partial area was 1/3. And now there's another spot here which really shouldn't have been here, so I'm going to ask you to just erase this out here. This should not have had another blank here. Okay, that should be the end of it. Okay, so now to add these 4 parts together, we're going to have to do a little bit of work for that. So let's see how we can do this. I'm going to take this work up over here to do it. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the 6 as a whole number, and I'm going to change the 4/3 into 1 1/3. And then I'm going to take the 3/2, and I'll write that as 1 1/2. And finally I'm going to take the 1/3 and just leave it as is. So in adding these things together, we can certainly add all of the whole numbers together. That's no problem. So we can do the 6 plus 1 plus 1. Pretty easy to figure out that that's 8. I'm going to choose to do the 1/3 plus 1/3 next, because that's pretty easy to do. That would give me 2/3. And then I'll deal with the plus 1/2 afterwards. So now in doing that addition, we do need to have a common denominator. So the common denominator between 2 and 3 is equal to 6. So to get a common denominator of 6, we have to multiply this one by 2, top and bottom. So that gives us 4 over 6. And then we have to multiply this one top and bottom by 3, and that gives us 3 over 6. And now let me just zoom in on this because maybe it's not quite big enough for you to see very easily. So hopefully now that's a lot easier to view. And now we can get on with finishing up this question. So we've got 8 plus 4 6 plus 3 6 gives us 7 6. And of course 7 over 6 is 1 and 1/6. So in addition to the 8 we have one more whole, so that's 9 and 1/6. And so now we can zoom back out again, get the full picture here. And so this is our final answer, which you can also copy down into this spot right here. 9 and 1/6 is our final answer. There we go. There's a nice neat box. Now, that's, of course, a lot of work to do. Having to do all those partial areas and adding up all those areas afterwards, quite a bit of work to do. It'd be nice if we could do an estimate. And so an estimate is certainly something that we can do. Let's first of all just kind of zoom in on the part that we'd like to see here. Okay, that should be a little better, and we'll lock in on that. Alright, so to do an estimate of this product, I'm going to take the 2.5 and just round that off to roughly 2, and I'm going to round that down, and I'm going to take the 3 2/3 and I'm going to round that up. So as an approximate of this product, we could do 2 times 4, which would give us 8. That gives you an idea. 9 and 1/6 is pretty close to that. So that's how you could do an estimate. You could go to the nearest whole number. Now, the last thing we want to do here is look at how we could do this multiplication. How we could do this multiplication by switching the mixed numbers into improper fractions. So let's do that now. So if we take the 2.5 and we write it as 5 over 2, so recognizing that in each whole there are 2 halves, so 2 times 2 halves gives us 4 halves plus 1 more half, that's 5 halves. And then recognizing that 3 2/3 is 3 times 3 plus 2, so that'd be 9 plus 2, 11/3. Okay, so maybe I could just show the work not only for that one here, but maybe I could just show the work for this one, just in case people are wondering where I'm coming up with that numerator. It is 2 times 2 plus 1. And so now what I can do is I can take the 5 over 2 and multiply by 11 over 3. And I can do top times top. 5 times 11 gives me 55. And bottom times bottom. 2 times 3 gives me 6. And now I can leave my answer as 55 over 6, or I can change it back into a mixed fraction by asking how many times does 6 go into 55, and that would be 9 times. 9 times 6 is 54. We'd have 1 left over out of 6. So the answer in lowest terms is 9 and 1/6. In other words, it was already in lowest terms. So whether you write your answer as a mixed fraction or an improper fraction, I don't have too much preference there as long as you are getting your answer in lowest terms. Alright, so let's move on to the next page and see what we've got there. So here in number 2, it says to show the improper fractions as mixed numbers. Write the fraction in lowest terms, and the first line is partially completed for us. So this is just getting a little bit of practice with switching back and forth between improper fractions and mixed numbers. So I'm just going to zoom in on number 2 here. Lock that in and we'll do that one. Alright, so first of all, we've got 15 quarters. Now that 15 quarters is being broken up into 4 quarters, and another 4 quarters is 8 quarters, and another 4 quarters is 12 quarters. We're supposed to have 15 quarters, so there's another 3 quarters that's missing here. So each of those 4 quarters is 1 whole, so in other words we have 3 wholes plus 3 quarters. Just like 9 halves is 2 halves, and 2 more makes 4, 2 more makes 6, 2 more makes 8, and then 1 more makes 9 halves. So that means we have 4 wholes. The 2 halves are a whole each. It's 4 1/2. And 26 over 12 is 12 twelfths. That's 1 whole. Another 12 twelfths will give us 24 twelfths. And there are 2 more twelfths. So we have 2 whole plus we have 2 twelfths. And the 2 twelfths can be reduced to 1/6 by dividing the top and the bottom by 2 here. And so, we had to reduce the last one. This one we are going to have to reduce again. Maybe it would help to reduce it right off the bat. I can divide the top and the bottom by 2 here. It gives me 10 thirds, and then I don't have nearly as much to work with. So 3 thirds, 6 thirds, 9 thirds, and 1 more. That's 10 thirds. So we've got 3 whole plus 1 third. That gives you a little bit of practice with changing improper fractions into mixed fractions. The whole reason that we're getting some practice with this is because really when you're going to do your multiplication, you don't want to have to draw a diagram like we did here and have to do partial areas and then add them all up to get our final answer. It would be much more convenient if we could do what we did here at the bottom, which is we take those mixed numbers, we change them into improper fractions, we multiply the top with the improper fractions of the bottom times the bottom, and this gives us a product as an improper fraction. Then we can change it back into a mixed fraction, which is basically what we were practicing on the next page here. So now we're going to get lots of practice with multiplication of mixed numbers starting with the mixed numbers, changing them to improper fractions, getting the product as an improper fraction, and then switching it back into a mixed number. That's what we're going to do in number 3, where it says to complete the table. Okay, so here we go. Now the first one is done for us. You can see that the 1 2/3 is changed into 5/3. That's because in one whole there are 3/3 plus 2 more thirds, that's 5/3. And the 2 1/4 becomes 9/4. 2 wholes, 4 quarters times 2, that's 8 quarters plus 1 more quarter, 9 quarters. And multiplying that, basically you're just doing top times top, gives you the 45. And the bottom times the bottom gives you the bottom here. 3 times 4 is 12. And 45 over 12 as a fraction, well, you can see that 12 goes into 45 3 times. 3 times 12 is 36, and there's going to be another 9 left over out of 12. So that 9/12 of course can be reduced to 3/4 by dividing the top and the bottom by 3. And that's it, that's the process. So now we are going to do part A on our own. 1 1/3 is 4/3, and we have it twice. So we're doing 4/3 times 4/3, that would be 16/9. 4 times 4 is 16, 3 times 3 is 9. Now 9 will go into 16 once with 7 left over. So there it is as a mixed number again. Next one, we've got 2 1/3. So we've got 2 times 3 is 6 plus 1, 7/3, and we're multiplying here by 1 1/2, which is 3/2. Now, rather than multiply and then simplify, I'm going to be smart about this, and I'm going to divide this by 3 and that by 3, and I'm going to end up with 7 times 1 is 7, and 1 times 2 is 2, 7/2. Now I'm going to ask a question, how many times does 2 go into 7? That's 3 times with 1 left over. There you go, 3.5. If you've got the idea of how to do this, you might want to try C and D on your own. Okay, pause the video, give that a shot by yourself. Okay, so hopefully now you're just getting ready to check your answers, and let's see how they work out. So 1 3/4 is 7/4. 1 2/5 is 7/5. Multiplying these two gives you 49/20. 20 goes into 49 twice with 9 left over. And the last one here, 1 5/6 is 11/6. 2 1/2 is 5/2. Multiplying the tops, multiplying the bottoms. 12 goes into 55. Oops. 4 times 12 is 48. We have another 7 left over out of 12. And that's it for number 3. So now we can move on to the last question here, number 4, where it says that Jasmine worked 3 1/4 hours a day for 5 days, and we want to know how many hours did Jasmine work altogether. We want to show our work. So let's just zoom in on the area that we're interested in working with here without losing any of the text. Okay. So we'd like to do 3 1/4 hours a day times 5 days. So writing these both as improper fractions, 3 1/4 is going to be 13 quarters. And we're multiplying by 5, which is 5 over 1. Now we can do the tops multiplied. 13 times 5 is 65, and 4 times 1 is 4. Now we ask how many times does 4 go into 65? That would be 16 times, with 1 left over out of 4. So now to give a full sentence answer here, it's asking how many hours did Jasmine work altogether. So altogether, Jasmine worked 16 1/4 hours. So that's it. That is the end of this lesson. Hope you're able to understand that pretty well. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And thanks for watching the video. Have a great day.